Let's go to Amsterdam and speak to the economist Steve Keen. Steve, thank you so much indeed for your time. There are quite a few rich people, ultra-rich people in the United Kingdom who've already said that if Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour Party leader who calls himself a socialist, wins the election on the 12th of December, they're going to leave the country. What are the legitimate, let's call them, objections to redressing this kind of wealth imbalance through tax reforms?
Well, probably the only really major one, some of these people created businesses which generated the wealth that they're now being criticised for. And that is certainly true of people like Dyson. It's true of Jeff Bezos, obviously, and Amazon. And these are products which are innovative. Musk is another example, which in many ways the lure of the wealth is why they generate their business in the very first instances. So for those, that's the sort of person I'll be dragged out to defend, to attack the idea of taxing billionaires. But at the other extreme, you have billionaires whose money has come through inheritance alone, and that's the vast majority of the vastly wealthy. And then also there are others who have really by remanaging their tax affairs, so that, for example, some companies, let's call them Not the News Limited, makes most of its money in the Cayman Islands, where it has an office it shares with about 50 other multinationals that might house a family of four, and allegedly all the profits are made there. So there are legitimate to say that people who manage to evade taxation have become wealthy by evading taxation. They should be made to pay it.
Sure. Listen, Steve, I know as an economist you'd like to stick to fact, but if you don't mind, I'd like you just to address an issue of philosophy when it comes to money. The American dream that is continually pushed onto most of the population, do you see that as some kind of myth? Because could it possibly be something perpetrated by the very rich to persuade the people who are amongst the masses and earn a normal amount of money that they too can one day become extremely rich, and that they should therefore not vote for parties that want to increase taxes, because one day it could be them who have to pay those taxes?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the little ways in which you could actually make that the American dream true is to say, yes, we all start that way. You die with what you earn and accumulate during your own life. And we reset the whole damn thing, then the next generation and your kids start from scratch. Now, of course, that isn't what happens. And one of my favorite cartoons in this had two rich men talking in a gentleman's club, and one said to the other, "The secret of my success, Charles, is some advice my father gave me as a young child. He said, son, here's $1 million, don't lose it." So that's the sort of, we ignore, in economic theory, ignores the inheritance of wealth, which is nonsense, because you don't get wealthy because of your own work during your own lifetime. For the vast majority, you inherit it.
Okay, we've got Elizabeth Warren's tax calculator, and while you talk to us about what you feel about this tax calculator, we're going to show what Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg would pay under that. And just to illustrate for you, who probably can't see the pictures that our viewers can, is that Warren's tax calculator would mean Bill Gates paying $26 billion in taxes. Interestingly, the founder of Microsoft has already said he'd be happy to pay $20 billion in taxes. But probably most people wouldn't be, I wouldn't have thought.
No, I mean, you don't go into the game to lose the money you've accumulated. You do want to hang on to it and pass it on, and that's a major motivation for getting into these mega businesses in the very first place. But what has actually happened, and this is why we have such disputes over it, they can afford, the accountants and the lawyers, to remanage their affairs in such a way that they evade the effective income taxes, or they don't even declare a profit in the first place. For many years, that was how Amazon operated. It was through capital appreciation, which avoided the taxes, rather than income and dividends, which had to pay the taxes. So it's evading what everybody else has to pay, which is the reason people are complaining. Not that they should be targeted because they're wealthy. They're being targeted because they're wealthy and not paying tax.
The thing is, we're talking about billionaires, and when you look at last year's global wealth report from Credit Suisse, it really hits home that actually billionaires are probably not the main issue here, because that report said that if you have $4,210 to your name, you're still richer than half the world. Steve, what are the prevailing and most credible economic theories that would have a solution to such disparity?
Well, one of them is what's called modern monetary theory, because a major problem with trying to tax the money back out of the hands of the billionaires is the belief that taxation finances government spending. Now, when you look at the accounting operations involved in creating money by private banks and creating money by governments, governments don't tax to spend. They in fact spend and then tax afterwards. So one little solution here would be to say, well, you might want to hang on to that money, which you've accumulated by not paying last year's taxes. We'll generate more money we spread to everybody and dilute the value of your wealth. It would be complicated to do that, but that's one feasible way to go about it. From my point of view, in my models of financial instability, when there's an increasing level of private debt, that's what drives inequality. It ends up being the workers who pay for it by getting less money. The bankers get more fundamentally. And that is the prelude to a financial crisis and an economic crisis. So there's a good reason to reverse inequality in terms of the stability and functioning of the economy itself.
Steve, you know, when our interview producer Karima was speaking to you, she came back to me and said, Professor Keane is not available for another week, but please wait to do this segment until he comes back because he's really worth it. And it really was. Steve, thank you so much indeed.